You know what? I rather like Leslie. They built her up well, and although they haven't utilized her much quite yet, being an ad has a lot of comedic potential. I'm sure they will keep her as a major supporting character. Right? Right?
Welcome, dear all, to Friendly Faces Everywhere.
Trove and Advertising, the penultimate episode of the season, continues the story exactly where we left off, with a new teacher, Mrs. Nelson, explaining some basic grammar.
Alright guys, now let's go back and talk about infinitives. Remember, those are verbs combined with the word to.
Well, technically to itself can be part of the infinitive, then it's called full infinitive. In other cases, to collocates with the gerund form, as the verb turns into a gerund with any other preposition. Worst episode ever, 1 star! Now, I actually like how things are progressing. This episode is basically divided into 4 subplots. There's Jimmy's escape with the ad traitor Leslie, the boys distracting themselves while trying to investigate, and Garrison's reaction to the changes introduced in the town, eventually connecting with Randy's own disillusionment with PC. PC Principal and the striking frat boys are left alone, as they mysteriously disappear from PC Delta, which, well, doesn't really get explained, apart from PCP himself, who shows up for the finale. It seems each new episode we find out something more about Leslie, and I'm loving it so far. Her and Jimmy's role in the three-parter, and particularly in Truth and Advertising, ties into the theme of, truth and advertising. Well, okay, it's more about how political correctness has to use a degree of censorship to exist, whether or not it's okay, as well as how influx of information can easily distract us. The episode is also about humanity, betrayal, ways of presenting reality, media... Okay, there's a fuckload of subjects the episode touches upon, and I'm sorry, it's lost me on that front. I should dive into it more, but it's become a tad chaotic. However, I can still point out some interesting character moments I've noticed, like how during the talk Leslie had with Jimmy, she tells him PC Principal is trying to make sure people like him and her aren't allowed to exist. Does this mean Jimmy might also turn out to be an ad? Well, do you remember last season's episode, Freemium Isn't Free, where Jimmy starts going around advertising freemium games? The evidence is building up. It was a small moment, but I enjoyed Bar Brady's arc finally coming full circle with him refusing to shoot the 2 kids. Also, you don't usually see him teaming up with Jimmy. This season in general is full of unlikely pairings like Kenny and Kim. Well, not in a romantic sense, mind you, thankfully. On the boys' side of things, we put focus on a more obvious pairing. Kyle and Stan stop trusting one another again, which stresses even more how their best friendship has weakened since you're getting old. I don't have much to say about this, except I like how Stan's the 3rd kid to be compared to Cartman.
My dad's stupid, not a bitch. This is about you being scared, Kyle.
It is you, isn't it? That's why you're trying to shift blame on me. That's very Cartman of you, Stan.
Oh, that's low. Don't you dare call me a Cartman.
For the last time, I'm not fat, so stop calling me fat, goddammit! I do not sound like Cartman, goddammit!
The comedy in this episode is very well handled. I like how back in Jimmy's story, the newsmen keep talking to each other as if they were an heir. Later, I've got to give props to Cartman's line about nobody looking at him in a shoe shop. It had just the right timing to make me laugh out loud. It's also a nice touch that they do a callback to Reverse Cowgirl by mentioning the death of Clyde's mum. Could the shoe shop be owned by Clyde's dad, by the way? It has just occurred to me that Cartman has been pretty absent this entire arc, which I approve of. Cartman may be my second favourite character, but he's best used in moderation. In general, I've come to the conclusion that South Park is at its best development-wise when it spreads its focus a little, making effective use of the town and its various characters. Thankfully, it doesn't turn them generic this time around, which often happens to, for example, Mr. Garrison or Craig, but retains their original characterization, which provides an opportunity for jokes. This is where the main advantage of a storyline comes in. Trey and Matt aren't limited by the 24-minute mark, thus giving them the time to make the personalities shine through the plot. I find it interesting how Randy's relationship with the PC culture evolves. He still seems to agree with its progressive ideas, but resents its economic side effects, namely South Park turning unaffordable for the Marsh family. What I might think might have been a missed opportunity is that they didn't show the reactions of the other families, turning the PC economic crisis of the old residents into more of a widespread phenomenon. Maybe they'll dig into it next season. One more thing about Randy. During his conversation with Sharon, he mentions the man who's pricing them out of their own town. Could this suggest the character of reality might be back from the dead? After all, Butters also used to call him that way during Safe Space. A minor complaint I have is that there is a lot of repetition of plot points in that characters find out and talk about things the viewer already knows, thus spending time on things that don't need to be explained instead of those which do. Usually, though, they do lead up to a good joke or character moment, so kudos there. As I said, this is just a minor thing. I'm going to spend more time on the flaws of the arc next time, when we take a look at PC Principal Final Just. You know what? I rather like Leslie. They built her up well, and although they haven't utilized her much quite yet, being an ad has a lot of comedic potential. I'm sure they will keep her as a major supporting character. Right?
Welcome, all to Friendly Faces Everywhere.
Trove and Advertising, the penultimate episode of the season, continues the story exactly where we left off, with a new teacher, Mrs. Nelson, explaining some basic grammar.
Alright guys, now let's go back and talk about infinitives. Remember, those are verbs combined with the word to.
Well, technically to itself can be part of the infinitive, then it's called full infinitive. In other cases, to collocates with the gerund form, as the verb turns into a gerund with any other preposition. Worst episode ever, 1 star! Now, I actually like how things are progressing. This episode is basically divided into 4 subplots. There's Jimmy's escape with the ad traitor Leslie, the boys distracting themselves while trying to investigate, and Garrison's reaction to the changes introduced in the town, eventually connecting with Randy's own disillusionment with PC. PC Principal and the striking frat boys are left alone, as they mysteriously disappear from PC Delta, which, well, doesn't really get explained apart from PCP himself, who shows up